I'm Veronica Dudo in Washington, D.C. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, crisis averted for now. As a ceasefire is struck between Iran and the U.S., we look at what it entails and how long it will last. Pastoral concerns, we talk to the Archbishop of the Archdiocese for the Military Services about how they're providing for the spiritual needs of our servicemen and women. Plus, an Easter story.
If I am here to tell you this story, it is because of this miracle.
Hear the journey of how one priest came face to face with death and resurrection. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast day of St. Julie Billart. Our top story tonight, President Donald Trump calls it a big day for world peace, adding that Iran has had enough. The president announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran, but on the condition that the Strait of Hormuz opens immediately and completely. The last-minute deal between the U.S. and Iran headed off President Trump's threat to unleash a massive attack. Now he's hopeful this could be the golden age of the Middle East. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Veronica, regarding the Strait of Hormuz, it appears that story is changing by the minute tonight. There are reports that the strait has been closed by Iran, but the White House is pushing back, saying those reports are false. This is all happening as the ceasefire just gets underway. Meanwhile, President Trump warning other countries on social media not to supply military weapons to Iran, or they'll be tariffed at 50%. No exemptions.
President Donald Trump says the U.S. will work closely with Iran, writing, "There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the United States will, working with Iran, dig up and remove all of the deeply buried B-2 bombers' nuclear dust." He adds, "We are and will be talking tariff and sanctions relief with Iran." Vice President J.D. Vance calls it a fragile truce. He spoke during an overseas event in Hungary.
What the president did is he basically issued an ultimatum to the Iranians. He said, open up the straits, stop trying to hold the world's economy hostage, and we'll engage in a ceasefire. And that's exactly the agreement that we came to last night.
Vice President Vance referring there to the Strait of Hormuz, where oil tankers and other cargo ships have been blocked by Iran.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also told reporters,
I can announce that the president is dispatching his negotiating team, led by the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Witkoff, and Mr. Kushner to Islamabad for talks this weekend.
And at the Pentagon, the Secretary of War gave a battlefield assessment.
Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory on the battlefield. A capital V military victory.
Pete Hegseth says the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism could not defend itself.
We untied just a fraction of our strength, and Iran suffered a devastating military defeat.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said more than 13,000 targets have been struck, knows a ceasefire does not mean it's officially over, and is ready to attack again.
With the same speed and precision as we've demonstrated over the last 38 days, and we hope that that is not the case.
Not all fighting has ceased. Israeli strikes hit central Beirut. Israel said the ceasefire does not apply to its fight with Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon.
And on Truth Social today, President Trump also warned that during negotiations with Iran, there will be charlatans and fraudsters sending out their own lists and agreements. He says that's basically bogus, that negotiations will take place behind closed doors. Veronica?
Oh, and I understand the NATO Secretary General is there today?
Yeah, that's right, Veronica. Here at the White House meeting with President Trump. As you know, President Trump has been quite critical of NATO, some wondering if the alliance will even survive in the coming months. And earlier, the Secretary General met with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, at the State Department. Veronica, will send it back to you.
Thanks, Owen. Joining us now is Daniel Coaches, Senior Fellow at the Center on Europe and Eurasia at the Hudson Institute. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the recent ceasefire agreement includes the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Following this announcement, what's the tone of today's meeting like, especially as Secretary Rutte has been called the Trump whisperer due to their good rapport?
Well, you're absolutely right. The new Secretary General has a very good rapport, I think, with the President of the United States. He's playing a very similar role that John Stoltenberg played in starting to assuage some of the U.S. concerns around the NATO alliance. How do we move past some of the disagreements that the U.S. has had recently with some European NATO members and look for ways that we can move beyond those disagreements to implementing what may be an agreement between the U.S. and Iran, at least in the short term.
Now, looking to work more cohesively together, do you think there are any other goals of the meeting? And also, how closely will Russia and China be watching?
I think that Russia and China are clearly watching very closely. One of the outcomes of the war against Iran may be some strains, at least publicly, between the United States and our European allies. But when you look sort of under the hood, the U.S. wouldn't have been able to sustain the pace and the scale of the operations that we did against the Iranians without the support of European members, in particular their basing and their airspace usage. So I think operationally ties are still very close, but I think it's trying to patch up some of that more diplomatic language and some of the strains that we've seen.
Now, President Trump recently described NATO as a paper tiger. Is this criticism fair? And what does pulling out of NATO mean for the rest of the world?
Well, I think that it's clear that for decades, European member states have underinvested pretty heavily in their capabilities, which therefore sort of undermines NATO deterrence across the board. But when you look at what's happened really since the September 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, has been a massive reinvestment and rearmament in Europe. And that continues at pace. So I wouldn't call this a paper tiger. I think that Europe is investing quite heavily in its own capabilities and is investing in helping to support Ukraine, largely without the support of the United States. And so I wouldn't say that, but NATO, I think, really still remains sort of the bedrock for the United States security here. And so if the U.S. were to withdraw from that, I think that it would be a tremendous act of self-harm, and I think would be further destabilizing, not just in Europe, but sort of across a multitude of regions.
Now, a 2-week ceasefire has been announced, and it could be fragile. But we also heard the president talking about a golden age in Iran and that the U.S. Would be there to help some of the ships go through the Strait of Hormuz. So when looking at this situation and to see how NATO has responded, what are your thoughts?
I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. There are still some reports that the Iranians control the straits, that they're firing at ships. And so I think when you look at where the Iranians are in their proposal, where the U.S. proposal is, there seems to be a lot of space in between. So I'm a bit skeptical that this is going to hold long term. I'm even more skeptical about the idea of the Iranians collecting a toll, which I think is going to help them to rebuild their ballistic missile capabilities and the nuclear program, which was very strongly hit by the United States.
Daniel Kochis, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on today.
Today, at his general audience held in St. Peter's Square, Pope Leo XIV praised the news of the ceasefire.
In light of these past hours of great tension for the Middle East and for the whole world, I welcome with satisfaction and as a sign of living hope the announcement of an immediate 2-week truce. Only through a return to negotiation can an end to the war be achieved. I urge everyone to accompany this time of delicate diplomatic work with prayer, in the hope that a willingness to engage in dialogue may become the means to resolve other situations of conflict around the world.
The Holy Father also renewed his invitation to all to join him in the prayer vigil for peace this Saturday at St. Peter's Basilica. We're honored to welcome back to the program His Excellency Timothy Broglio, Archbishop of the Archdiocese for the Military Services, USA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very happy to be with you.
So first, as Archbishop of the Military Services, what is your reaction to the ceasefire agreement?
Well, obviously, I'm happy for anything that might lead us toward peace. And so I'm happy that that at least the two sides are talking to each other and perhaps looking for a solution to avoid any sort of armed conflict and perhaps pull back on the tensions in the area.
And of course, this certainly is a work in process. Now, when we look at the church, it does provide clear teachings on what is needed to embark on a conflict and also how to wage war. In your view, have those criteria been met here?
I don't think they have. I think that really the dialogue that's taking place now should have taken place before any sort of military action was taking place, because you do have to measure the amount of force used. You have to measure also, was the United States directly attacked? Certainly it was not. And so I think some of those elements are missing.
Now, the ceasefire is in place, and it's for 2 weeks, but it doesn't mean that the men and women in the military can stand down. Things could be more tense than ever as they are keeping a watch. How is the Archdiocese caring for the spiritual needs of military service members and their families during this time of conflict?
Well, we're trying very, very much to meet the spiritual needs with the chaplains who are actually in the Middle East right now. And I know that they're working very hard to answer some of the questions that men and women might have. They're bringing the sacraments to them. And at the same time, most of the families that were in the area, such as the ones who were in Bahrain, have been brought home. So they're either in Europe or they're back in the United States.
Now, as you mentioned, working towards peace, that's key. In your view, what does an authentic peace look like at this point, and how concerned are you that Lebanon has been excluded from this ceasefire?
Well, I'm very concerned about that, especially because my French colleague yesterday contacted me asking for some support for the troops that are there that are defending the ceasefire that was arranged a long time ago there. And so there is genuine concern. And I think that's problematic, that it isn't a whole vision of the entire area, because the Middle East, as we know, has been a tinderbox for a long time. And so it would be helpful that any sort of peace dialogue involve all of the participants and all of those who might be either belligerents or victims of any sort of military action.
Archbishop Timothy Broglio, thank you so very much.
I'm very happy to be with you.
As Owen Jensen reported earlier from the White House, and Archbishop Broglio mentioned, while the U.S. and Iran announced a 2-week ceasefire today, the streets of Beirut tell a very different story. A major military escalation is underway in Beirut. The 2-week ceasefire does not include Lebanon. The IDF launched its largest coordinated strike of the conflict, leveling over 100 sites in a 10-minute window. Smoke was seen billowing over the capital, and according to reports, dozens have been killed. We'd like to bring on now Charbel Boumaroun, president of Mashrek Center for Research and Studies in Lebanon. Thank you so much for joining us. First, what has been happening in Lebanon overnight and today? We've heard that there are some 100 bombings in 10 minutes.
Yes, actually, this happened earlier today. Despite the ceasefire between the United States and Iran, the bombardment continued. Around 100 bombardment took place, more than 100 kills and more than 800 casualties within 10 minutes.
What is the mood on the ground over there, knowing that Lebanon has been left out of the ceasefire by Israel?
Actually, people in Lebanon are between 70%, for example, that are against the war and against Hezbollah, and 30% pro-Hezbollah. People on the ground, Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Sunni, and other people that are non-partisan to Hezbollah are very pissed off of the situation. They are seeing that their country is being destroyed because of a war they don't want to enter with, because they want to be neutral. They don't want war, they want peace. And the war is happening to them, and their country is being destroyed.
Now, for people who may not understand, can you talk a little bit about Hezbollah and its members living among Christians and basically using them as human shields?
Okay, actually, when the war started, Hezbollah people, or the Shia people that are supporting Hezbollah, fled the Shia-dominated regions and fled to Christian areas. And 2 days ago, an incident happened. An apartment in Ain Saadeh, which is a Christian neighborhood in East Beirut, was attacked by an Israel drone, and 3 Christian people were killed there. And so people are nowadays reluctant to rent Shia tenants because they are seeing that Hezbollah leaders and IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that are present in Lebanon, are using Christian areas as safe havens and as places to do their operations.
How are people coping? Are they able to get food and energy while there are some shortages in the area?
Actually, we have two sides of Lebanon. We have the Christians that are living in Mount Lebanon and northern Beirut and East Beirut, and we have the Christians that are living in the south of Lebanon. So I don't know if you know that there are Christians that they refuse to leave their villages in South Lebanon, which is mainly in Ermesh, Dibel, and Ibel. There are 12,000 Christians still living there. And actually, yesterday, the Apostolic Nuncio was heading there to deliver them some foods and some oil and some medical stuff, but he was forced to retreat after his convoy taking fire.
Right now, Friday is the day that negotiations can begin, but of course there are many hours before that. What would you like the Vatican to do to help the Christian community in Lebanon?
Well, actually, 2 days ago, some Christians from Ermesh village and its surrounding, where, as I mentioned before, 12,000 Christians are still living there. They sent a letter to the Apostolic Nuncio and through him to the Pope to ask him to send an apostolic envoy to live there in Ermesh. In a clever move that was made back in 1985 by Pope John Paul II, the Saint, when he sent Monsignor Celestino Bohigas to live in Jizin, which was a major Christian Catholic town in southern Lebanon, where he sent a special envoy to help Christians stay there. So now Christians need a special envoy, a special apostolic envoy to stay there, because the Lebanese armed forces have left the village. Hezbollah is surrounding them from one side and Israel from the other side. So people just want a Vatican support just to stay there and remain there and not to leave their home villages.
Charbel Bou Maroon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Filled seat. The results are in to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House. Who won and what it means for Congress. And a priest recounts his miraculous escape after being kidnapped in Uganda. Republican Clay Fuller has won the special election runoff in Georgia's 14th congressional district to replace former GOP Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. While Republicans are breathing a sigh of relief, Democrats say despite the loss, they're still excited about the margins of Fuller's win and what could it mean for November. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has been following the race. Eric, could this be a preview of what's to come in the midterms?
Good evening, Veronica. That is what Democrats are hoping for. The results of last night's election continue to show a pattern of Democrat candidates outperforming in strong red districts. But Republicans say as long as President Trump is endorsing GOP candidates, Republicans will win.
And he has made sure that we are going to win. And he made sure that he was the ultimate trump card. Now, the Democrat Party poured millions of dollars into this campaign, poured lies into this campaign. But they can't beat Donald Trump, and they never will.
Marjorie Taylor Greene won the district as a hardcore Trump ally by more than 108,000 votes in the last election. But in Tuesday's election, Fuller won by just over 15,000 votes, a lot less than expected.
The Republican Party had to spend almost $2 million in a smear campaign to get this win. They should never have to spend money on a ruby red district. That tells you that things are changing.
Georgia's 14th congressional district is the most Republican district in the state. President Trump won it by 37 points in 2024. Georgia voters say kitchen table issues brought them to the polls.
The economy as a whole, I mean, everything is costing us way more, and we're not getting paid any more money.
Cost of living is number one right now. I understand the other issues at hand. But, this is something that's been hindering this country for 4 or 5 years. The rising cost of economy, cost of living, and I think that needs to be addressed first.
Fuller is expected to be sworn in when the House returns next week, raising the GOP margin to 2 votes. Georgia voters in the 14th Congressional District could see a Fuller-Harris rematch in November because the special election only selects a candidate to finish out the remainder of Green's term. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Endless Joy, one priest's story that uncovers the true meaning of Easter. Plus, when Pope Leo met the Harlem Globetrotters, things got interesting. Find out how coming up. Pope Leo stresses that holiness is not a privilege for the few, but for all the baptized. He added that everyone is called to live in the grace of God, practice the virtues, and imitate Christ.
Alla pienezza dell'amore verso Dio e verso il prossimo.
At the Weekly Talk, the Holy Father reminded the faithful that holiness is God's gift to us, which is manifested in our daily life every time we receive it with joy and respond to Him with commitment. He highlighted that the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, are nourishment that fosters a holy life and helps us imitate Christ, the model of holiness. In turn, by being holy, the Pope said, we help make the Church authentic. The joy of Easter does not end with a single day. Instead, it continues throughout the Easter octave, which we are now celebrating. And even after that, the faithful are called to rejoice in the resurrection of our Lord each and every day. EWTN Vatican journalist Valentina Di Donato has more.
For Christians around the world, Easter is the celebration of resurrection, the belief that love has conquered death. For Father Giulio Albanese, the resurrection isn't just something to be celebrated one day out of the year. It's something to be witnessed, to be lived every day.
The meaning of Easter is this, that we have to live in peace. On the very day of Jesus' resurrection, on Easter Day, Jesus appeared to the apostles. And the message he delivered to them was this, peace to you.
But for this missionary priest, the meaning of resurrection became real in the midst of survival. A few years ago, Father Albanese was kidnapped in northern Uganda.
All of a sudden, the government soldiers surrounded our village where we were, and there were many civilians inside. And the government soldiers started firing.
But in the face of death, Father Giulio Albanese's faith didn't disappear, it only deepened. An officer approached him and his companions intending to kill them. Awaiting his fate, Father Giulio remembered another priest who was killed by the rebels, and in prayer he asked him to intercede. At that very moment, the miraculous happened.
And then he looked at me and he said, Father Giulio, what are you doing here? He had been an altar boy of mine in 1993 at Mbuya Parish in Kampala. Eventually he became a seminarian, then he left the seminary and he became an army officer. In that very moment he recognized me, and if I am here to tell you this story, it is because of this miracle.
For Father Albanese, that moment exemplifies what we experience at Easter.
This is a story of resurrection. We have to believe that our life is in the hands of God, and that the Lord is faithful. And in the very moment you live an experience like this, you understand also the significance of life, that life is short, life is precious, and it is a gift from God that must be preserved.
A reminder that this Easter, the resurrection, is truly an invitation to a new life of grace. In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
And finally, before we go, we want to share a moment of joy at the Vatican today. During his weekly general audience, Pope Leo shared a lighthearted encounter with the Harlem Globetrotters. The Holy Father was seen smiling as he learned how to spin the team's signature basketball on a single finger, a playful gesture reminiscent of a similar meeting between the team and Pope Francis. It all happened on a day marked by the hopeful news of a ceasefire in Iran. The scene served as a reminder of the Church's universal call to peace, fellowship, and joy. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.